Hello, everyone. Um, we're live another week with the Ubuntu Community Team Q&A. This week there's two of us. Last week you had the pleasure to view Michael Hall and Nick Skaggs, and I think Daniel Hovak was in there together with Martin Pitt. So this week it's Alan Pope on my left or on my right, depending on how you see it. And myself, David Planella. We're both from the community team, and we've been working lately quite a lot with Ubuntu app developers and the Ubuntu app development community. Yeah, you can ask us any question about Ubuntu open source and mostly whatever you like. Is there anything I've forgotten, Alan?
I don't think so. Yeah, any questions, anything you like, we'll answer pretty much anything unless it's anything to do with X Prize. You have to ask John about that. We know nothing about that. But yeah, Ubuntu related questions. If it's anything like technical support, we might throw you somewhere else like Hash Ubuntu on IRC or askubuntu.com. Those are better places. This is not really for tech support. Yeah, anything else related to Ubuntu, Canonical, the phone, the desktop, server, tenuously, then ask away. You can, if you go to ubuntu.com, ubuntuonair.com, you should see the video, and there's a chat box beneath that which takes you to an IRC channel, and you can ask us the questions there.
Cool. All right, so it seems we've got the first question already. So it's an interesting one. So Anchat507 is saying, what's the status of Ubuntu Edge phone, of the Ubuntu Edge phone? Did it go away? Well, just a bit of context here. The Ubuntu Edge was a Kickstarter project that Canonical, the company that creates Ubuntu, started to essentially create a super phone. It was going to be like a limited edition. Canonical is by no means going into the hardware business. We've got no plans for that. We're still a software company. And the goal was to reach, I think it was 30 million or 32 millions to build a super phone. The hardware specifications were just amazing. The price with those specs was still really, really good. It was a project where we always said that we want to make this realistic. We want to build 40,000 units for this device, for this batch, and we need to raise this amount of money. If we don't raise this amount of money, the project will not continue. But the project being like creating this super phone, Ubuntu as an operating system for phones, tablets, and desktop is continuing as usual, going strong. We've got our first commercial devices coming very soon, with which are essentially partnerships with hardware manufacturers. They're going to create the hardware, and we are creating the OS. So the Ubuntu phone as a device in itself, it never materialized, but it had a huge success. We broke all records of crowdfunding. I think we raised about 12 millions. And it put the name of Ubuntu like everywhere. So we started, we passed from being these unknown crazy guys who want to create a free operating system, open source operating system, to someone who is doing something seriously and who's going to be like a serious contender in the mobile world. So yeah, that was Ubuntu Edge for you.
Yeah, it's a real shame that we didn't hit the target. There was we launched the campaign at around the same time as OSCON in Portland last year, and I went along with Jono and some of the community members to show off some prototype devices that we had, and these were engineering samples. They had no electronic guts inside them. They were designed to be the shape and size and the weight of the Edge, you know, when it's finally made, and they were lovely to hold. And we also had the Nexus 4 running the Ubuntu software, so people could see what the device might look like and also what the software, an early version of the software would look like. And we got a lot of positive feedback. People who came by the booth, we were showing them the sample and showing them the software, and we got a lot of positive feedback. And yeah, it's a shame we didn't hit the target, but that's in the past, and we're always moving forward. So as Dave says, we're still working on the software. That hasn't stopped. We work on that all day, every day, and we will have devices out on the market before the end of the year.
Yay. Yeah, not always during the day, but round the clock, actually. We're a distributed team, and you'll find people 24 hours a day, actually. And I think that brings us well to the next question. So FDS blah 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 blah, an insanely long IRC name, is asking, it seems like most of the activity on Ubuntu App Devel happens during the workday in the USA. Is there a better way to get answers in the evening in the Americas besides IRC? Well, it depends. I mean, I think we've got quite a good coverage, for example. So people from the community team, some of us are based in Europe, and some of us are based in the US. So we've got pretty good coverage, to be honest. And I mean, apart from people from the community team at Canonical, there's other community members who live all over the place. I mean, I think the important thing is to try again. If someone doesn't answer a question, it's because they might be away from the keyboard, busy with something else, or perhaps they cannot actually answer the question. So the important thing is to be patient, to answer questions with lots of with lots of context, so that people can actually know what you're asking, and they can better help you. And if you don't get an answer on IRC, you can always go to askubuntu.com, and there people can provide an answer whenever they've got their time. And also, Ask Ubuntu has got quite a lot of good visibility. If not, we've got our social media channels. You can go to Google+, search for Ubuntu App Developers. You can ask your questions there. And also, we've got the Ubuntu-phone at lists.launchpad.net. That's the place where most of the discussion related to the phone and app development is taking place. So.
Yeah, we do have a quiet period kind of after the US is going to sleep and before Europe wakes up. There is a kind of lull around UTC midnight through to about 5 in the morning. And we don't have good coverage there, which, yeah, I agree with Dave. The best thing to do is fire a mail off to the phone list. It's pretty active. There's loads of developer announcements. Loads of developers hang out there, not just app developers, but people who develop for the platform and develop the platform. So the phone list is probably the best place. If it's quiet in the evening US time, then that's probably the best thing to do. Ubuntu phone list.
Cool. So FDSA says, thanks for the answer. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. And if you've got any questions, yeah, you know where we are. And do you want to take the next one from Slovak Boy? I'm not sure if I can answer it. I don't know this BlueStacks app player.
Okay, so Slovak Boy on IRC is asking, does there exist something like BlueStacks app player for Ubuntu 14.04? I would like to run Android apps on Ubuntu with no need of switching OS. So I don't know is the answer. As I understand it, this is a thing that lets you run Android apps in a window. I think isn't it cloud-based? So the apps actually run not on your machine, but in the cloud somewhere. I believe. I don't know is the short answer. I know there is a version for Windows and a version of BlueStacks specifically for Windows and OS 10, but I guess they would be the right person to ask if there is a chance that they might port that across to Linux. We don't have anything specifically to do that. And I don't think we plan to do anything to run Android apps on the desktop or on the Ubuntu phone, but that doesn't stop third parties developing tools that can do that. So I'm not writing that off as no, it can't happen. Just that we haven't developed anything to do that, but other people could do.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. Well, it doesn't really, but sorry.
All right. So Kalle is asking, I feel like the port of Ubuntu Touch to Android phones slowed down after the initial hype, and now it's hard to get on the train because the documentation is confusing and or outdated. Is this because Ubuntu for devices will be more of an OEM thing, or do you plan to maintain the aftermarket status for different devices like CyanogenMod does? Yeah, I think that's a good that's a good observation, and I think it's a valid point. I mean, right now we do put effort on the porting project, but we've devoted less time to it now that we are quite focused on getting Ubuntu shipped for real hardware. That's not the reference devices. The thing that happened with the porting documentation is that at some point we switched. I think we started the porting effort in 13.10, and then we switched to 14.04 and now to 14.10. And between those changes, between those releases, there's been quite a lot of change. When we started being like an Android image running Ubuntu from like an Ubuntu image communicating with some Android drivers only. So the documentation has been lagging indeed. That is not to say that we've abandoned the ports project. It's just that the focus right now is to get Ubuntu ready for RTM. All of our engineers are really, I say, tightly focused on that because we've got a really tight deadline and there's still quite a lot to do. We're confident that we're getting everything in, but we have to make sure that we don't get too distracted. On the other hand, the porting effort has always been a community effort. So if someone steps up and wants to update the documentation, I'm sure they get help if they ask on Ubuntu phone. I think it's just a matter of finding a champion or someone that's got really interest in leading the porting project and getting the documentation up to date.
I think we suffered a bit, as David said, when we moved from 13.10 to 14.04 to 14.10. There was a couple of fairly significant platform changes, and the porting effort that was done early on, where there was suddenly a raft of like 20 devices that could run Ubuntu Touch. They were all made with the early setup that we had, and when, as David said, when we flipped and booted an Ubuntu kernel and put the Android bits inside a container, when that whole model changed, it made a lot of the porting guide invalid and broke some of the previous ports. And I guess people, sometimes they lose motivation because we're quite a fast-moving target and we've got a lot to do and things are changing all the time. I guess if you're not paying attention and you don't realize these things are going on, and we don't update the documentation frequently enough, then you could get left behind and you could get demotivated. I'd personally love to see a porting day where we just get the documentation done so that it's right, because as far as I understand, we're not planning on architecturally changing things dramatically. We're not going to flip things around again, or massively break all of the ports that are there or that are being made right now. So it would be great if we could get that porting guide really nailed. And I think it wouldn't take more than a weekend of hacking with a few people with different devices working out some of the, you know, the subtleties of the porting guide and getting that documentation done. It could even be done, you know, as a collaborative document, you know, a Google Doc or an Etherpad or something like that, where everyone edits together and we just, you know, start afresh, as it were, using the old porting guide as a base. But we would probably need some people from the platform team to help us out. And as David says, getting some of their time is tricky because they are just madly busy, focused on RTM at the moment. But yeah, it's something we should schedule an update to the porting guide so that we can, you know, make it easier for people to port to other devices than the ones we support, because we don't support a huge number of devices.
Yeah, I really like this idea of porting day. I think we should actually develop it. And I was going to say flesh out. I just bit my tongue.
So I mean, in order to do the porting guide justice, you need a bunch of people who are, you know, who can do this. It's not a straightforward thing. It's not like, you know, running a couple of shell commands and ding, it's ported. There's a little bit of work there, and I don't claim to be an expert in that regard. But you also need people who have devices that need porting to. It's no good porting to mythical devices that somebody else has. You kind of need to have the device in your hand in front of you to be able to test out, you know, whether the kernel boots, whether Mir runs, and, you know, all those kind of like annoyances that break things. Yeah, maybe we should schedule a couple of days, maybe a Friday, Saturday, or something like that, where there's you know, time during the working day. It could be a canonical Friday afternoon thing, you know.
Yeah.
To get it bootstrapped, and then the Saturday, the weekend time for the community to like flesh it out and, you know, highlight where all the errors are, and then, you know, we fix it on the Monday or something like that. I don't know, but yeah. I think we should do that.
Yeah, I like the idea. Cool. All right, and actually, just to wrap this one up as well, what Alan was mentioning about the fast pacing as well. The other thing that has affected some of the ports is that some of the devices have become really, really old by now. I mean, the mobile world and hardware goes very, very quick. And I mean, I myself was actually starting a port because I wanted to improve the porting guide. I was doing this on my spare time. And I realized that after having actually done the port, there were so many new features, and new things that apps could do, animations and all of that, fancy things. And the device had just become too slow, too old for that. So there's another component in there. But yeah, I mean, but in any case, I think the porting guide is something that we should continue growing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Mark Courtbus is asking, could we expect Firefox OS apps optimized for Ubuntu Phone OS? And someone is asking, what do you actually mean by optimized? And Mark was saying, like the swipe functionalities.
So basically, porting Firefox OS, given that Firefox OS is predominantly the apps, well, as far as I understand, all the apps are HTML5 apps, and we support HTML5 on Ubuntu Phone. It's not a giant stretch of the imagination that apps could be ported across from Firefox to Ubuntu. And given Firefox OS apps, as far as I understand, I only have one Firefox phone and a limited number of apps installed on it. They don't use hardware buttons like the iPhone. There's one button on the Firefox phone, the round button at the bottom. So yeah, it's possible that those apps could be ported across to Ubuntu. The thing to note about swipe gestures is the platform consumes all swipe gestures, edge-related swipe gestures, from the left, the right, and the top The only one that would be app specific would be the bottom edge. And I don't know what Firefox does with that bottom edge swipe, whether it dedicates that. So there might be some conflict there. But the general question about porting apps from Firefox to Ubuntu, yeah, that would be great. And I'd love to see apps ported in both directions. It would be awesome if, you know, some of our apps were ported across to Firefox OS, and if some of the apps in the Firefox OS marketplace were ported across to Ubuntu. That would be awesome, and yeah, it would be good to see. I don't see any reason why not. I mean, there are technical limitations in that there may be features in the Firefox OS platform that we don't support. Yeah, there may be specifics and technical limitations in the way that Firefox OS is built. For example, I took a look at the Firefox OS email client, and when we looked at it, it was built in such a way that it wouldn't be easy for us to port it across without some fundamental changes to Ubuntu. And that may be the case with some of the other apps as well. Yeah, I think it's one of those case-by-case basis. You know, if you're a developer and you've got an app and it's in the Firefox OS marketplace, then yeah, it might be a good idea to have a look at our SDK and our developer platform and see if you could port that across. And yeah, we'd be happy to help you do that.
Cool. All right. So Ivo Xavier is asking, in the first release of Ubuntu Touch, the scopes, apps, music, etc., were in the bottom of the screen, like we've seen in the current Unity 7. Now they are at the top, but I think this change is not the best way. In the first release, we just need to tap the icon to change the scope. Why this move? I think someone from the design team might actually be better suited to answer this question, but I can give you my take, and Alan can probably give you his as well. I mean, some context first as well. The Scopes API has undergone drastic changes in order to make them more powerful, more usable, and more flexible as well. So also the UX has had to adapt to this new API, or rather the other way around. So a new UX has been created for which the API, the underlying bits have been have adapted. So this new UX, these new ways of using scopes has meant that we're much more flexible in aggregating content from different scopes and putting them in umbrella scopes, let's say. This makes scopes much richer in terms of the content that they can search and they can present you. And also you've got really nice features that enable you to personalize your phone a lot more. You'll very soon see how you can mark scopes as favorites, so that the phone truly is like your phone, your own phone. And in that regard, you'll be able to change the UI and what it looks like and what it does. Also, right now, what you're mentioning in the first release, we just needed to tap the icon to change the scope. Why this move? You're still able to do this same thing, to tap the icon to change the scope. In fact, if you just select the scope, or if you even if you don't select the scope, it's much quicker to get the content. You just type something in the search, and then you get the results for either the relevant scope you're in, or if you're in the main scopes page, what we call the scopes page. Yeah, we're like redundancy. You get all of the results in there after you've done your search. So I hope this provides a bit of context, perhaps even if it doesn't directly answer the question.
It's also worth noting that the buttons that you get in Unity, I think we're talking about the buttons in Unity 7, where you switch from one lens to another, right?
I think so, yeah.
Right, and that doesn't really map particularly well to a device that has a restricted width.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got 10 different scopes, you've already got music and video, and then you've got where your apps are, and then you've got the one where you search for scopes. Oh, my video is going bonkers again, isn't it? and then you might add some others. So you might have one for whatever your favorite video site is, or you might have a weather one, or something to look up things going on in your cities, transport map. By the time you get to about 6, you get too wide for what fits on a phone display for those buttons down the bottom. Typically, most smartphones only have 4 or 5 buttons across, maximum. So with the swiping, you can switch from one scope to the next, or go to the scope and then branch from there. So that was my take on it anyway. But I'm not a designer.
Yeah, we're trying to get John Lee from the Canonical design team, or someone from his team, to join us in an upcoming Q&A. So stay tuned for updates on this, and then you can ask him all of the question, all of your design questions, and get some authoritative answers on what's behind and the rationale behind the designs that we do for Ubuntu on the phone and on tablet. Right. Next one is Vasil. Question: will Canonical go for the flat design like iOS, Android, Windows? Again, someone from the design team might be better suited to answer this, but from what I've seen, like what's on the phone right now and what's coming for RTM, we're going for more of a, rather than flat, we're going for a more organic, more simple design. That's essentially leaves you space to switch between apps and to interact with the different UI elements.
Rafi asks, convergence. Don't you think that a phone powering a tablet like the Asus Pad phone would be much too weak hardware-wise? So I think what he's referring to there is our long-term goal, which is having a converged device where you may carry one device around in your pocket, but it could serve as multiple devices and could be used for multiple different purposes. So, for example, it would be a phone in your pocket, but then when you're sat on the sofa, you could dock it to a larger piece of glass and it's a tablet. You could plug it into a docking station and keyboard and screen, and it becomes your desktop PC, or you plug it into a giant screen and use a remote control and it becomes your TV. Those kind of converged on one device, one code base, one set of applications that work across all those different form factors. And the short answer to his very specific question, do I think that the hardware in a phone can power a tablet? Yeah, absolutely. Especially as the computing power in tablets, phones now is far in excess of the tablets we've seen in the past. So yeah, there's no reason why that can't happen. And in fact, when we first started working on Ubuntu Phone, I don't think it's any great secret to give away that we were playing with various devices, and one of them was the Asus Transformer, one of the very first tablets. And if you look back at that now, that's 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, and boy, is that thing slow now. It's painful to use. And the phones we were first playing with back when we first started developing this was the Nokia N9, and yeah, that's quite a low spec, by today's standards. So yeah, I don't think that's a problem, because as time marches on, the hardware specs of these phones and all portable devices just goes up constantly. The amount of storage you get, the amount of memory you get, the clock rate of the CPU, the number of cores, the resolution of the display, the size of the battery, maybe less so, but the hardware specs just go up. So yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
All right, I think I'm going to quickly take a question that I think we've missed, and before I do that, I'll add something that I've just seen mentioned on IRC. We were talking earlier on about porting Firefox OS apps to Ubuntu on the phone. And I'd like to mention that there's someone in the Ubuntu community, Michael Hall, actually from the Canonical Community Team, who has been working on a couple of apps to port applications from Android to Ubuntu, and also to Firefox OS to Ubuntu. The application for Android, if I remember correctly, is called NDR. And the idea behind both of these is not to like 100% porting and one-to-one porting, but rather to bootstrap. If you're an Android developer who's got an existing application, to run this application as a way to get some output that bootstraps you in creating an Ubuntu application based on that. So if you've got any questions on this, if you're interested to help, actually, you can just ping Michael Hall. He's mhall119 on IRC, and he's actually listening to us now. He's on this channel on #ubuntu-on-air. All right. So after all of this, going back to Vasil's question, is Ubuntu Touch using OpenGL, or will Canonical make its own software? Ubuntu Touch is using OpenGL ES, the embedded version of OpenGL, and we're doing this. We're using this via the Qt framework, as far as I understand. I'm not an expert on this, but if you've got any questions, we can forward them to our experts.
We've skipped around a little bit. Where are we now? There was a question from Rafi again, following on kind of from the previous question. Power consumption, battery life is lower on Ubuntu compared to Windows. Why is that, and does it apply to phones too? I can only speculate on why that might be, and I don't know the real reason. It shouldn't apply to phones as well. We're doing a lot of work to monitor the effect of changes that we make to Ubuntu Phone on things like the battery life. So we have a lab where loads of automated testing is done, and one of the things we've recently added is the ability for us to see the battery life of the devices, so that we can compare whether we're getting better or worse. And it's only when we start measuring these things that we can determine what's making the battery life worse or better, and do the right things to make it better, and stop doing the wrong things that make it worse. So we are working on that. Next question from Vasil asks, Ubuntu Maps, will it happen? So I guess you're talking there specifically about the phone. Maps being, a very useful app, a use case on a mobile device. So we already have a couple of very simple mapping apps on Ubuntu Touch in the Click Store. One is a very simple web application, which is simply the Nokia Here map. So it just goes to here.com, and that works really well on the phone. There's also a community member called Johan who's developed an app called OSM Touch, and that's a QML app which uses OpenStreetMap tiles, so you get the rendered output that you get from OpenStreetMap. So I think our take on it is I don't think we are developing a specific map application, but we're putting in place the platform bits like location detection, GPS, AGPS, and so on, so that other people can develop their map apps and put them in the Click Store. So there could be multiple mapping applications in the Click Store, and you pick and choose which one you want to use. But as far as I'm aware, we're not developing at the moment a mapping application. We don't really want to have that Apple Maps disaster that they had.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I'm going back again to a question I've noticed that we've skipped. Just a viewer at 19 past the hour was saying, as a person with little standard C knowledge, what does one need to learn to contribute in kernel development, or at least understand? Does it require advanced hardware knowledge or hardware, chip level, or advanced mathematics? Yes, I think if you want to specifically contribute to the kernel, I think you won't get around not needing C. Generally, I mean, the most common way to contribute to the kernel is with coding, fixing bugs or developing new features. I know that that you can contribute on documentation as well, but for contributing to documentation, you have to have also an intimate knowledge of how the kernel works, and if you're developing a particular device, you have to know the specs of that particular device. So in particular for kernel contributions, you do need C knowledge, and you do need good knowledge on hardware. If you want to contribute to any other area of Ubuntu or any other open source project, then it will depend on the project itself. There are multiple areas of contribution. You can translate, you can document, you can advocate. But yeah, for the kernel, you do need C.
We should get someone from the kernel team on one of these Q&A sessions.
Oh yeah.
Add that to the list.
Yes, I'm just scanning through the questions. I think the next one that we have, and then we'd be back on track. It's at 31 past from Kale. Question: do you believe there will be different window managers for Ubuntu Phone, so we could have Ubuntu Phone or Ubuntu Phone GNOME edition? I think you're going to be. It's most likely that you'll see this happening on the desktop as it is already, than having these flavors on the phone. Phones are not. I mean, on phones you've got quite a lot of restrictions that you don't have on the desktop. So you have to be very careful on what you're running so that it doesn't drain your battery and it does perform. So Python, for example, is the use of Python that we do on the phone is very, very limited. I think the main use that we have for it right now, apart from system services, is for running autopilot tests. But not actually for running UI bits. So I'd say I see it unlikely to happen in the near future. But as we're moving to a more convergent desktop, and especially on tablets, where you will have the same constraints as the phone, but you might have like more screen space. There might be something that you might be able to do there, but I'd say, I mean, and that's my hunch, I'm not an expert on window managers. I think we'll keep seeing the flavors only on the desktop editions rather than on the phone editions.
It's worth noting that we're not doing anything to deliberately stop that happening.
Yeah.
That the software that we're developing for the phone is open source and free software, just like it is on the desktop. So, someone could create their own spin, which had some other UI on it. But what you got to remember is when we set out to create the phone, we rewrote Unity from scratch, our desktop, and created our own toolkit because we didn't have one that was appropriate for the phone. So someone else would have to go through those same kind of exercise and bring GTK or whatever it is, and whatever their toolkit is across to the phone, and that's quite a bit of work. It could well be that a community steps up and decides to create their own UI for phones, which is great, and they could reuse the building blocks that we've got in order to do that. But that's a lot of work. Seeing how much work we're having to do that for the first revision, that's a substantial amount of investment of developer time to do that. So I kind of agree with David. I don't think that'll happen so much, but we're not actively stopping that happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so Rick Marquez is asking, was the UCP Ubuntu Certified Professional program completely abandoned by Canonical? And I must admit, I'm not familiar with this, so I had to look for this. And it seems that someone actually answered this same question on Ask Ubuntu. So it seems that the UCP program was started in 2006. It wasn't directly run by Canonical. It was run by the Linux Professional Institute, but it got discontinued in October 2010. And apparently there isn't such a course anymore, but there is a course for Ubuntu professionals that is not tied to any kind of certification. So that's all I can say from what I've seen on Ask Ubuntu. If you need more information on this, we might be able to, well, we should be able to just ask us essentially to direct you to someone in Canonical who can provide a better answer.
Okay, next question. We've got a few more and time running out. Vasil asks, I don't think I've skipped any. When they're released, will Ubuntu loaded phones have locked bootloaders? The short answer is I don't know. And that's a difficult one for us to answer because we make the software and it's up to the hardware manufacturer, the OEM, to decide what they do with their devices, which markets they sell it in, and price points, hardware specs, and whether it's locked or not is down to the person selling you the phone, and that's not us. We're making the software for the phone. It's up to the OEM how they deliver that experience in terms of hardware.
Okay, so I'll just go quick and take the next one. Jan Paz is asking, will the Ubuntu Touch be so keyword mouse oriented as Cinnamon? And I think that's more a question regarding whether Unity is going to be keyboard mouse oriented. The answer is yes. I mean, essentially we've got one UI that runs across devices. That's Unity, and Unity is both keyboard and touch oriented. It is keyboard oriented for power users who find it quicker on the desktop to use the keyboard, and also to provide better accessibility for those who cannot do touch.
Okay, moving on. Our friend Stuart Langridge, Aquarius, asks, there were a little while ago some rather nice design mock-ups for a new iteration of the Ubuntu browser. Are they anywhere close to landing? I find the existing browser UI rather clunky. How nicely put there. I don't know. I'd have to check with the team who are doing the browser, which is Bill's team. I'm not sure what state they're in at the moment. They're heads down developing, so I don't know whether that's been implemented yet. It's not on the phone that I'm currently using, so it's, as you said, it's not currently landed.
Yeah, but Stuart, as you are generally on Ubuntu on the Ubuntu AppDevel channel, you can also ping Olivier Tilloy. Is awesome on that channel, and he's the main. Well, he's the browser developer, and he'll be able to tell you in much detail where we stand.
Vasil asked another question. How will Canonical handle fragmentation?
Okay, so the idea is that that Ubuntu as an OS provides an operating system that's very, very customizable by operators and phone carriers. The idea is that the platform, you won't have to change it, but you can very much extend it in the sense that you'll be able to change the UI by adding or removing scopes, and these scopes are not tied in any way to any particular service. So such as Android, for example, which is very tied to Google Play. And that's the idea. That essentially you won't have to modify the underlying platform to extend or to customize your Ubuntu if you're your version of Ubuntu if you're an operator and you want to promote your brand instead.
Okay, next question. Vasil asks, is the Ubuntu Touch kernel made with C++, or is it using Qt C++ assembly like other OS kernels? Well, interesting question. The Ubuntu kernel used on phones is the same Linux kernel that you'd find on your desktop or your server or your tablet or whatever. It's the same Linux kernel. So defer that question upstream to whoever wrote the Linux kernel in the first place. It's that. On top of that, there's a whole load of platform services, and there's the UI. Some of that is written in C++. Some of it is written in QML. I need to buy a new webcam, don't I?
I was watching IRC. I wasn't watching you. I was watching IRC.
Oh, well, I got a highlight on IRC telling me it's freaking out, which it does frequently.
Did it went psychedelic again?
Yeah. Am I doing it again? No. So another one, Evo Xavier asks a question. I'm using Ubuntu Touch currently on Nexus 4, and I must say it looks promising. But I'm missing the option to switch off the vibration when typing SMS. Is there any plan to introduce this feature in the future on the Nexus 4? I think it's on our list of known bugs. We're aware that the vibration is like always on full tilt. I'm not sure what the status of that is, but I know we're aware of it.
All right. Next one, but I think I might have to leave it to you, probably because I'm not that much of a gamer. So Vasil is asking, now that Steam is releasing Steam OS, how about an Ubuntu gaming console?
Well, that's an interesting suggestion, but I actually don't see the point. Now that Steam OS is under development, and Steam OS is based on Debian. So for those that don't know, Valve took Debian components, some parts of Debian, and they rebuild them as Steam OS. Not the whole of Debian, but just the bits they need in order to make Steam OS. And you can download Steam OS, a beta of Steam OS, and run it on a desktop, and you're effectively getting a rebuild of Debian with the Steam client on top that you can use to download and install Linux-based games and also stream games from another Windows computer. I kind of don't see the point of having competing with that by having an Ubuntu gaming console, and we don't make hardware, so we wouldn't be making one of those. But there's nothing stopping someone else from doing that, from putting the pieces together and building, a lean, mean gaming machine and sticking Steam on top of that or whatever, or other software like Desura, which is another Steam-like thing for getting games, and I think GOG have one as well. So there's a few that you could develop a game console type thing that had more than Steam on it, but it's not something we would do, I don't think. All
right. Next one, Vasil is asking, why is the Ubuntu browser in Ubuntu 14.04 so crappy? I think, to be honest, to be able to answer this properly, you'd have to define what you find crappy in there. I think one thing that we have to realize is that it was the first cut of a completely new browser. And it will keep improving through time. But I think if you point at particular features that don't work as you expect, we might be able to answer these. And I'm saying this quite honestly. I'm not just trying to avoid the question. Right. Johnny D is saying, any plan to improve accessibility features for Ubuntu? Yes, definitely. Accessibility is one of the key points of the Ubuntu philosophy. and it is something that that we do put quite a lot of effort in. Right now on the phone, we rely on the accessibility features that Qt itself has, but we haven't done any analysis yet on what needs to improve. I think this will happen in the near future, but I don't have any ATA for this right now.
What's the next question? I think
next
is from, again, our friend Stuart. Can I write scopes in JavaScript now? I remember some people saying that would be doable at some point. One for you, David.
I don't think you can yet. I mean, I think the plan still is to provide both Go and JavaScript interface, but I'm pretty certain that hasn't landed yet. I'd have to find out the ETA. I've been a bit disconnected from scopes. I think Go has got a bit more of a priority right now than JavaScript, but as far as I know, that's still in the roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Just a viewer asks, what are the midterm objectives of Ubuntu desktops? On websites like OMG Ubuntu, they only mention a few visual changes when a new version is released. So at the moment, we're working hard on, pretty much the entire company is working hard on Ubuntu Phone and also the Unity Next for the desktop. So you may have seen there's an ISO image available which contains Unity 8, which we call Unity Next. And it's there as a kind of preview so you can try it out and see what Unity is like, or Unity 8 is like at the moment on a touch-based device. At the moment, I don't think there's going to be anything revolutionary happening on the desktop for the 14.10 release. You can certainly check out the blueprints on Launchpad. The desktop team have their blueprints on Launchpad publicly, so you can see what things are planned for 14.10. But I don't think there's anything major revolutionary changing in the desktop in this cycle. It's pretty revolutionary for us to have a new ISO though, with a completely different desktop on it, and it's also got the new display server Mia on there as well. So it's a limited video card support at the moment, and doesn't work in some of the virtualization software like VirtualBox. So you need to try it on real hardware, preferably something Intel based. But yeah, that's something for the desktop team. Again, we should get someone from the desktop team on ask them desktop-y questions as well.
Let's add it to our long list of guests. Cool.
Yes.
All right. So a query is again. Please, can we have an orientation lock on the phone, please? If you add another please to that question, we will, or we might consider it. But I don't know the plans on this. I mean, my hunch would be that we will be adding this at some point, but I cannot really say because I'm not familiar with those plans.
No, I'm not either. But I think it would make sense for that to come along when we have full shell rotation, which we don't currently have. So the shell doesn't fully rotate at the moment. So if you have a phone and you're looking at the shell, better word for that, and you rotate, it doesn't rotate at the moment. So that will be implemented, and when that's implemented, I suspect that's when we'll get rotation lock at that point. Okay.
So next one is just a viewer. How big is Canonical and your working conditions? Our working conditions are very, very hard.
No, you can see my working conditions behind me.
All right, so Canonical itself is about, it's more than 500 employees. The numbers keep changing as we hire more people. Our working conditions, most of the company works from home. I don't have the percentages right now. I think at some point we did this internal survey, but it's safe to say that most of the company is working remotely, or even if they're not working remotely, they're working with other people who are working remotely. We've got several offices around the world, and people who live in cities where there are offices have got the choice to work from the office or from home, or to mix and match. There are some people who don't work in a Canonical office, but they team together with other people that are living in the same place, and we work at co-location spaces. We work distributed, and we put quite a lot of effort in communication as well, and communicating distributed. So quite like most of the time, I'd say, in terms of communicating, in terms of transparency and sharing things, we are just the same or even better as a physical company, as in people who are working on a physical place. You always get to comment on what you watched last night, so it's not just an in-person thing. And we're most of the time on connected on IRC, even if we're not at our desks, so that we stay connected real time, essentially. I've probably forgotten something, but we're running out of time. So I don't know, Alan, do you want to close on that question? Or?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good time to round it off there.
Cool. All right. So what you're hearing right now is the sweet sound of the Ubuntu phone alarms, telling Alan probably that he's required at another meeting. So we will wrap it up here. We'd like to thank you all for your questions, for listening in, and remember, if you've got suggestions for people that who you'd like to see on these Q&A sessions that we're running each week, just let us know, and we can get them to answer your questions as well. So, like, for example, for people from the design team or the desktop team, any experts that you think might be interesting to have in these Q&A sessions. And I think with that, we'll see you next week on the next Q&A. Bring on your questions, and we'll do our best to answer everything. Anything else, Alan?
Nope. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.